body is like a sports car. It's well designed. It performs really well if you give it the right fuel and drive it in the right environment. If you drive it in the wrong environment and give it horrible fuel, I mean, you can't get mad at the car for not performing well. It just wasn't designed to go that way. And the body, I mean, people think just because something goes down the hole, it means that it's fine. Like the body will figure out what to do with it, but the body doesn't really know what to do with half the stuff that goes down there because it's just so processed and modified that the body just can't regulate itself properly. It can't digest, it can't metabolize, and our physiology suffers, and it comes out with symptoms.
Now, what about this whole grain?
Something to be labeled whole grain in North America, it has to be about 8% whole grain. So, I mean, that alone is a problem. And you can tell right away, like if you ever travel to Europe, especially like Germany, and you get a good German bread that's like, it's got nuts and seeds in it, and it's dense. I mean, if you throw that loaf at somebody, you probably kill them with it, right? Like it's intense bread. I mean, when you bend it in half, it bends and it breaks in half. And that's like a really good quality grain bread. But a lot of our bread, I mean, it says whole grain on it. And if you put it on the table and put your hand in it and let go, it'll leave a hand mark in the bread because it's still fluffy and gummy. And if you bend it in half, it certainly doesn't break. It just bends in half. So that's not really whole grain, even though it says whole grain. So the term whole grain is a bit misused. I think people are kind of duped by that because it seems to be very healthy, but it's not. It has very little fiber in it. Even in the whole grain breads, the commercial ones at least, when you look at it, it's basically reconstituted wheat dust that they've added extra fiber back into it. So it's not even from the original wheat that was milled. It's like they just add it back in at the end. And they may even add like caramel coloring and stuff like that and sugars and things and then some other coloring agents to make it more brown in nature. Healthy. But in reality, it's still quite horrible. So to address your issue about whole grain, you got to be very careful. You have to look at the kind of bread it is. It should be quite dense. It should be quite heavy. And it shouldn't compress when you press your hand into it lightly, and it should break when you bend it in half, right? Second part of your question is what about athletes, right? Because people think, well, I need carbohydrates to function because I know I have a long run this weekend, or I'm training for my triathlon. Of course, you need starch to function. I mean, carbohydrates are not evil,
right? But
the best ones, to be honest with you, are the ones that are not grain driven. So like a sweet potato would be fantastic, or a parsnip, or carrots and things like that, like more root vegetables. Turnip is fantastic as well. Squash, these are fantastic things to do. And they're very easy. I mean, you just get them, keep them in the fridge. I just cube them and put them in the fridge, and every once in a while I might stir fry them, or I might bake them or broil them. But that's a way better kind of carbohydrate that offers more of a slow release, that gives you energy for a long period of time as opposed to breads and stuff. Because the old mentality is if I have a big run tomorrow, I better load up on carbs tonight. So people go nuts with like tons of pasta and bagels, and they really load up. But those are very high glycemic foods that spike sugar very high and they crash it very quickly afterwards. So if you take something that's high carbohydrate but lower glycemic, that'll raise it slower and keep it sustainable, it's a lot better. Bagel's the most glutinous type of bread you can find, and they're probably one of the worst things. There's actually no healthy bagel that I've ever really seen. I mean, they taste good.
Sorry, guys.
But there's no real healthy bagel. Ezekiel bread is probably one of the better grains you're going to get. There's other companies like Silver Hills and things like that do sprouted grain bread. What a sprouted bread is basically they sprout the grain, and then they dehydrate it, and then they mill it. So when you sprout a grain, what happens is it increases the enzymatic activity of that particular grain, and it sort of eats away at a lot of the starchy components of the grain. So it actually activates the grain. It makes it far easier to absorb because it almost absorbs kind of like a vegetable, not quite, but kind of, and it increases the nutrition of that significantly. So if you are going to get a bread, sprouted grain bread is the best.
Okay.
Is the best, yeah.
Awesome. If you go to Italy today, they don't actually eat a lot of pasta, but I love pasta. So I find to still incorporate it a little bit for our family. I really make sure that it's made in Italy, made and processed in Italy, because I realize that they're going to use a much higher quality.
For sure.
Is that
even better if it's just all Italian? There's not even any English on it. That's even better, right?
I like the one where I always tell people look for the one that has the sticker on it, because it's the sticker that's you know, in the English translation for us. So I mean that I'm noticing though that European manufacturers are learning that people are gravitating towards that, and now sometimes it's a product of Canada, but it's made in Italy. So you really have to
You gotta be
Look for
careful. There's also rice pastas and quinoa
Yes.
pastas, and even a patient brought me a sample of bean pasta, which
That's
I tried, and
amazing.
actually wasn't that bad.
Yes.
But you gotta be careful. So the key with these pastas, here's a little tip for cooking them. Make sure you wash them first before you cook the pasta.
The bean pastas.
All pastas,
Okay.
even the wheat ones too, but the rice one, the quinoa one. When you wash it, this film comes off of it, and it could be bits of the flour or a bit of the processing, but a film comes off of it, so much so that the water is quite milky. Like this is just putting the raw pasta in like even cold water.
Yeah.
It's not hot water, just cold water. It gets this milkiness to it. So I'll wash the pasta 2 or 3 times, dump the water, put more water in, clean it, just use my finger, I whisk it, do that a couple times, then you cook it after. And I find it tastes a lot better, and it's a lot lighter, and it's not as gummy kind of thing. So it's just a way of cooking it that makes it taste a lot better. I think it also lowers the glycemic index because you don't want this floury stuff in the water.
Right.